Good day, everybody. We are now into our third webcast of the day on a topic that is near and dear to our hearts. We are calling this the 2020 Futureproofing Awards session. This is the start of a 5-month process to define who in the world out there, brands, companies, organizations, are poised best to take advantage of the future. And in this discussion, we have truly a global panel of experts that have come together to talk about business models, ecosystems, talent, and transformation. We've had two very eloquent and quite insightful discussions that we've had earlier today. I don't think this will be any different. I'm looking at a beautiful set of erudite and very educated panelists that are chomping at the bit to get going on this topic. So, as always, this is our 10th episode of season 1, and I've done all of these with my illustrious co-founder, Andrea Cates. Say hi, Andrea.
Hey, good to see everybody.
And we would be nothing without Joanne, who ringleads everybody and sends you out panelist links and troubleshoots and does all the spade work that we just can't do ourselves. So this is kind of our template for today. We'll probably go for about an hour. And if we're going to award a future-proofing award, we probably should define, well, what is future-proofing? Because although it exists as a term out there in the world, I think people have different understandings of it. We've kind of tried to simplify it. People that are trying to embrace trends and actually, build for a faster, bolder, simpler, friendlier future. Certainly the tagline behind our new book is called The Future Beyond Innovation. We think that's what future-proofing is. And really, at the end of the day, it's companies that are really impressive doing remarkable things, either because they're growing a lot, they're building a lot of value, or they're creating impact that we've noticed. And there's some synonyms here, but I think we'll identify at least 12 companies in our discussion today within each one of these 4 sections: business models, ecosystems, talent, and transformation. And certainly these are big topic areas. This is our first launch. This is the pre-holiday version, I guess, where some of the experts are going to chime in and officially nominate who they think 2 or 3 companies are. We're going to open this up to everybody. So anybody that has a stake in the future, which I think we all do, can nominate people online in January for Future-Proofing Award. So if you have a great personal, business, client, whatever experience with an organization that you think is head and shoulders above everybody else and is well poised for the future, you can nominate them. And here is our great panel. And Andrea, do you want to introduce our panel?
Well, we're excited because we have 4 people on the panel, and the first one is Gregg Witt, and we have a lot of things to say about everybody, but we did win the bet today that someone would be in a hat, and that would be Gregg. So we've already made some money on the webcast. One of the things that's great about Gregg is that he says about himself that he glues people together to make magic. We've had some experience working together, and that's all true. What he wouldn't tell us, although you can look him up, is that he comes from a background of being a professional skateboarder. Some people think that's an oxymoron, but Gregg has leveraged that into incredible expertise and insight about youth marketing. And so he's a really savvy guy who understands the present and the future and what's going on below an age group that many of us aren't familiar with. So that's exciting. And Jonathan Hoffberg is going to talk about ecosystems, and his expertise is UX. He's really an expert in enterprise user experience and has worked with the biggies like GE, Accenture, Deloitte, Adobe, Ford, eBay, Roche. We've worked together, and he's one of those rare breeds that understands not just what it is, what UX is, but how to bring it to scale and how to make it all work. And he's also a polymath. And so we're talking about generalists versus specialists. And we would say that Jonathan is the true Renaissance guy with secret powers in all things musical as well. So we sometimes crank that out of him. So Nina Fountain is going to talk about talent. There's a lot that she brings to the table, including an accent. We'll let you guess whether it's from New Zealand or Australia when she starts talking. She works in both places. And she's a workplace strategist and works with transforming teams. What we love about her too is she's also worked with the Deloittes of the world, the Australian government, et cetera. But the notion is that it blends the idea of how you prepare a workforce to be future ready. So it's right in our wheelhouse. And I love that Farid Mheir, are you speaking French or English today?
I'll do English.
English, we'll do English.
It'll be easier, yeah.
Yeah, we could do both. He could do both. But one of the things that I love about him is he describes himself as a gearhead, which means he actually knows how things work. And in the early days, he built one of the first e-commerce solutions for a big grocery chain, and has also leveraged that insight of actually building something into a strategic approach to let retailers figure out how to build digital strategies. So a lot of people say, oh, digital transformation. Very few people have actually done it. So he does it, he shares it, and he is I thought he was cool until he told me he calls himself a gearhead. So that's our panel for today.
And the format of our discussion, we've asked our panelists to come to the table with a little bit of homework. Hopefully they're ambitious enough to tell us why their category is so important to the future, the one that they're representing. 2 to 3 companies that are great in it. Since we're all global or regional in perspective, I love when we can actually share something that may be different outside of your standard Silicon Valley, New York, or London. And then maybe what we can tease out of other examples in terms of what might be reapplied to other leaders that are listening to this webcast. So with no further ado, let's get right into it. I want to talk business models with Gregg. And I must tell you, Gregg, we're going to geek out for the next little bit because I've spent a ton of time thinking about business models, and I know you're really good at it too. I just find the world at large, like, I don't know if we've run out of ideas, but I think it's configuring what you have is becoming just as important as just what your next new idea or new product is. So I guess, how do we want to enter the discussion? Why are business models so important to the future, Gregg?
I mean, like, without a business model, you're just spitting into the wind. It's one thing to have an idea. It's one thing to think that you want to create content, or you want to produce a product. Even if you're really clear about a certain type of product that you have, or a certain type of service that you have, but if you don't actually know how that, like, what are the not just focusing on monetization, but if you're not very clear about how that is going to monetize and how that's going to be successful in multiple years to come, not just eyeballs, not just engagement, which is a lot of my world, because I represent, of course, like youth market and brands that are trying to reach young people. So like, without a business model, you don't have a foundation. It's like you don't have a structure to the home. You don't have there's no architecture. There's not, you're going to fail. You're going to fail, or you're going to get incredibly lucky. Because I see companies get incredibly lucky, and then they stumble into a business model, eventually by force, which is, just completely stupid. As far as the way to start, unless it happens as a pivot, and it becomes, I mean, having a business model is integral to success. I mean, there's my quick, short answer.
I love your 2 different things. Is it like this intended thing where we planned on doing it, or we lucked into something and then we played it back? It's almost like a game of golf sometimes, where business models look so easy looking back at the tee box versus looking forward to the green, right? So
yeah,
use a
bad. I think a lot of, if you don't mind me just hopping in, but what your little rant there made me think a lot about Web 1.0, right? Where these companies would show up on the back of a napkin, waxing poetic about the next big thing, and then they would figure out the business model on the way down, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And in a more mature venture-backed entrepreneurial world, that doesn't fly as well anymore. But
yeah, exactly. Like those, because obviously, like, a lot of apps come my way, our team's way. And it was interesting to see that shift from let's just drive eyeballs, just drive downloads for us. And we're like, even then, like in the last 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it was like, okay, we're going to drive these downloads, and we just need the numbers, we just need the people in here. And that's just not what, investors are investing in. That's just not, thankfully, that's just not the way it is.
It's not enough anymore.
Yeah.
Now, we said, hey, come to the table with 2 or 3 different companies that you think, wow, they've either are moving to a business model, they've added a business model, or they've invented a new business model that may have some legs in the future. Any candidate companies that you're looking at, Gregg, or that you think?
Yeah, I made some notes. You know, I like you. I'm a geek at this. The gentleman on the bottom of my screen. Sorry.
Farid.
Yeah, Farid. I'm a geek when it comes to this. So I made all kinds of notes. Look, who has a business model that's incredibly effective, that's been developed, been honed in, that's maintained cultural relevance for very since 1966 will be Vans. Vans which is VF Corporation, is doing an incredible job on so many different levels in terms of, you know, how their business model operates, and then is able to scale on such a global level with VF Corporation and all the sub brands that fall under it. So I'm a big fan of their business model and models, which are all very unique. And then I made a note of, you know, how are some companies like modifying their business model, like Foot Locker and I won't go too deep in names of companies, but like Foot Locker is doing a lot to sort of not pivot, but make their business model more relevant to not just young consumers, but I think just to shoppable consumers in general, online, social, digital, whatever. I hate using that word digital. Sorry. I didn't do that. Sorry, everyone. These are all my colleagues that I'm talking to. And then I'm also just sort of impressed by Bang Energy, just like jumped into an absolute saturated, you know, a market with really no room, and Bang Energy is gaining market share. I find it really interesting. I've been studying that, like how they do that. And I'll name one last one because everyone wants to know about TikTok and it's the buzz. And I don't want to be like, oh my gosh, TikTok, you know, I don't want to be that guy. But it is a big piece of my market. So I think that's a business model that I think is interesting to talk about. I'm going to step back and let the steering people steer me somewhere in this. But that's where my starting points are.
I'll ask a follow-up question because it's interesting. I love the fact that you chose Foot Locker. I'm not as into Foot Locker athletic retail as maybe I should be, and then there was like a few other brands that would be probably newer, or like certainly TikTok I know is new, and my suspicion is Bang Energy, unless you tell me differently, is more of a startup-y type of thing. So question on business models. We've had a little bit of this discussion earlier today. You know, who wins? Who can build a better business model? Is it easier to build a business model from scratch and be a startup and do it and just like be completely clear on that? Or are there some inherent advantages of a corporation that allows them to make some mistakes and still create some new business models that may work? Do you have a sensibility around that, Gregg?
I do. Yeah, I'm highly opinionated. It's all about the leadership. It's all about the leadership. It's the leadership because you have Slack that came in and just had really great vision, really great leadership, and just was able to come in and just, you know, I mean, I'll just say it, like just decimate teams on Microsoft and just say, that's like the same features. What's the deal? It's the same product, man. It almost is the same product. The UI person's slightly disagreeing with me. I understand that. And I agree. I agree with the UX person or UI UX. But the idea is there's leadership that can come in with a startup, and a startup has an opportunity to do it right from the beginning, especially if they have had a lot of experience with companies who have done it right. But I will say, if I was to answer sort of with the you know, on the plank or with a gun to my head, I would probably put my bet on the flexible established corporation, because like anything, whether it's distribution or the business model, like when you talk about Vans and you look at the corporate structure of VF Corporation, they understand how to develop and guide business models. They understand how to govern the individual brand business models and what works and what doesn't work. They have that vision, that foresight, as you've said, to see what works and what doesn't work. So they're not guessing. Now they have to maintain relevance, and they definitely need to make sure that they don't rest on their laurels. But they definitely have, I'd say, the leg up, because they've been there and done that. And I think to second guess experience if I was going to wedge my bets on experience versus a startup, it's always going to be on the corporation that's maintained flexibility and has great leadership as well.
And it's interesting. You deal with a more of a youthful class of brands where I look at a business model. I go, well, there's the way you produce it, the way you pull it all together, the way you charge money for it, or the way you treat your customers. Is there observations you have around how those moving levers move in your world, or just globally for everybody? Like, is there?
Yeah, I don't think they're any different in my world. You know, how it skews to youth, or how it skews to older demographics necessarily. At the end of the day, you need a subscriber. You either have a parent. You know, what's different in my world is that I'm often working with a dual or three different demographic groups at once, where I'm shifting influence on a parent versus, you know, the bottom up or the top down with the younger person, depending if it's kids, tweens, or teens. I have like four demographics: tweens, teens, young adults, kids as well sometimes. So that sort of situation's different. But I think the business model of is this something where it's a freemium? Is this a paid subscription? Is this a product that's e-commerce, or a product that you have to go to brick and mortar retail for? Or if this is just pure entertainment and we just, you know, need engagement, we need we need to be building relationships. I mean, I think all the pieces have to work in an integrated fashion. That's just good business. But that's my perspective. Maybe I'm getting older. Maybe that's what's happening. Don't
say older. No, you're not. You're wiser, better. This one may be a quickie, but I like shoes. Everybody loves shoes. You've talked about a couple of people that sell different types of shoes. When is it that I can have the subscription economy turn my shoes into, I don't want a lot of shoes in my closet, so can I just have something that every month there's like a new set of shoes that show up on my doorstep by subscription, and then I can send them back the next month? Is this part of my world soon?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, it's slipping because it's already in existence. Like, it already exists. I'm slipping on that. Like, look, you're just gonna be able to 3D print exactly what you want for your shoe. So it'll be not solely, but solely. I didn't even do that on purpose.
Oh man,
you know what?
That's dad humor if I've ever heard of it before.
Look, you guys, what people don't know watching this is that you started off with like Dr. Seussisms, and then it just like, it put something in my head. Look, you're gonna be. All right. You're gonna be.
I want you to hold all of your dad humor for later on. We're gonna come back to actually business models. We're gonna turn over to Jonathan Hoffberg, who we're gonna talk about ecosystems, which is kind of related to business models, but I think it's, you know, partnerships, collaborations, groups, and consortia of businesses coming together to actually build stuff. And I'm curious, I mean, same question for you, Jonathan, like, why are ecosystems so important? And I know you spend a lot of time in healthcare, so you can either take that lens or just generally, why are they so important to the future?
Well, nobody does anything by themselves anymore. Least of all in healthcare, actually, which is an area that I've been spending a lot of time working and thinking about lately. And actually, the way I interpreted the ecosystem question was really more about ecosystems of delivery, because actually that is one of the fundamental areas of of innovation and transformation in the healthcare space. Because the current way of delivering certainly critical care in the United States is through the hospital. And the hospital is an entity that is over 100 years old in fundamental design. And it's a very expensive way of delivering value in that space, because you have everything on tap. It's designed to be able to offer any service at any time to any patient who is within its physical boundaries. But that comes at a great cost. So, the typical overhead for a major tertiary care hospital like Stanford here, not far from where I live, is about 10x over the cost of the actual services provided. So that's an incredible overhead. And that translates into the kinds of skyrocketing costs that we're seeing here in the United States for healthcare that are driving our premiums through the roof, that are raising the hue and cry over a nationalized health plan and so forth. Now, by comparison, a local hospital that Alta Bates, which is right down the street, has an overhead of more like 6x, which is better than 10. But hey, most companies, like in Gregg's space, for instance, could not run on a 6x overhead. It's just not tenable. It's only because of the incredibly distorted system of healthcare reimbursement that this is even that every hospital in the United States doesn't actually go out of business. But the future, the way out of this, is to develop new ecosystems for the delivery of healthcare that are built on some concepts that we've been hearing about for a long time. The concept of precision medicine, and the concept of personalized medicine for precisely diagnosing and then effectively and predictably treating a wider and wider degree of ailments in specialized centers that do only one thing. And an example of that is a company called Qantas, that is a specialty clinic that in 4 days will operate on you for a hernia. And they can do so for a fraction of the cost of what a general service hospital will do. And they have a very high success rate. They're one of the best in the country at it. There are other companies that are, I think, a little more focused on the diagnostic and the prevention of illness before it even presents. And those companies, I think, are also really very much leading the way. Two companies that I want to draw attention to in each of those areas are Health Nucleus, which is a subsidiary of Craig Venter's Human Longevity, Inc. You might recognize Venter's name because he led the team that sequenced the human genome for the first time in 2001 at a cost of $100 million. Well, today you can sequence a genome for around $1,000. So that creates a whole bunch of opportunities to really be very precise about diagnosis, and therefore it's going to open up a whole set of opportunities for treatment. Another pioneer in this area is Leroy Hood's P4 Medicine Institute up in Seattle. I saw Leroy speak about 10 years ago in Los Angeles at the company where I was a director of product, and he was inspirational. Even then, he was one of the guys that developed the original gene sequencer. So he's a real pioneer in genomics. And so his institute up in Seattle does scans and snapshots and then works directly with their patients to analyze patients before they get sick and help them develop a better understanding of their own health and habits which will ensure long, healthy, disease-free life. And so I think that's sort of where the ecosystem trends are going. There's going to be more and more healthcare outlets like P4 Medical Institute, like Health Nucleus, like Qantas, for delivering healthcare, that it's going to be done more efficiently and with a higher degree of success and aimed at prevention and precise diagnosis and treatment.
I know those are, I mean, I think you've adroitly answered why is it important and also some examples of companies. You've mentioned them, and I think your entry point was cost. You know, costs are crazy in terms of the States. I'm a dumb Canadian, so we don't see our healthcare bills. But that notwithstanding, Are there other reasons why you would build ecosystems beyond merely cost, either in the healthcare space or just writ large?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll stick to healthcare because I'm on a roll here. But the ability to deliver value locally, as opposed to having to go to a local hospital or one of the ivory towers, like Stanford or Cleveland Clinic or Mass General, is that you're more likely to go more frequently, and you can afford to go, and you can develop a relationship with your doctor and with a team of people whose goal is to keep you well, as opposed to people who are really looking, like there to provide an expensive intervention in the case of something gone terribly wrong. So I think there's a lot of value there in terms of increasing longevity, increasing the quality of life of people living with chronic conditions, and just as we all get older, it's there's always a threat to quality of life that comes along with that, and so we can live longer, healthier lives by remaking our healthcare system to be more proactive and to deliver more value to more people in a cost-effective way.
It's interesting. I'm going to make this really radical leap from your medical examples of cost containment and localization of your health. And I'll just mention maybe another ecosystem that isn't in healthcare, Uber Eats, right? I don't know if you have used the service before, but I think it's been fairly restricted before in terms of how many places can you actually get stuff delivered to you on time, without a infrastructural burden that a local restaurant may pay for. And I think Uber Eats is maybe an example, successful or not. I think some people view Uber as the evil empire, but certainly, at least in my neighborhood, I can probably have access to about 400 restaurants, whereas even 5 years ago, the network of restaurants that I might have a realistic option of getting something from at 10 o'clock on a Friday night might be much smaller. So making the bridge between healthcare and whatever, maybe there's, I don't know, your opinion, Jonathan, if that metaphor applies.
Well, I think various forms of telemedicine are going to become more important in the delivery ecosystem. I know that Kaiser has been experimenting in the lab with the idea of an autonomous ambulance that shows up to whisk an ailing, perhaps person who might be having a heart attack, or maybe they don't know, to the hospital, and then administer autonomously a series of interventions that are designed to stabilize the patient, understand their state, open up a line of communication to the hospital so that when they get there, they have a greater chance of surviving. There's, so this, I think, the Uber model is colliding with the healthcare model, and there's a bunch of different experiments going on around the country to test it in various use cases. That's the first thing that comes to mind, but there's of course other ways to slice that as well.
All right, this is almost halftime, so we've covered two from Gregg and Jonathan's standpoint in terms of business models, ecosystems. My master of synthesis is Andrea Kate. So what have you heard so far, Andrea, that has shaken you to the ground?
Well, yeah, I'll just say one thing, which is I think that all of the examples that are very industry specific also, because I'm always thinking cross industry, obviously, also make me think about the effect of both. Let's say what you just talked about, an ecosystem. I'm thinking about what's happening in food because the big issue of food, of course, is, all the way down to the farming, the production, the vertical, how the food issue is going to happen. But I also look at the ecosystem of delivery, because this, I hate to tell you who it is because it's not a popular person, but there are ghost kitchens that are the equivalent of commissaries that are kind of the next generation that we're seeing. So it used to be, 18 different restaurants in your neighborhood, depending on where you live, could all have one central delivery function. So in terms of the structure and that ecosystem, those were the relationships. But now there's this new movement that I'm sure people have heard of, where there's these commissaries, where one central kitchen has a bunch of veggies and different spice profiles. And this is the Thai spice profile, and this is the Mediterranean, and this is the vegan and whatever. So one central kitchen in a given local neighborhood can have, the central kitchen. You don't need those restaurants. So let's see what happens to local restaurants when first, people don't come in because they didn't need to, because they had Uber Eats or whoever delivering. But what happens to a restaurant if their recipes have been kind of cloned into a central kitchen that can be noodles, 5 different spice profiles? So I'm just seeing ecosystem as a really interesting ecosystem, and business model is like the next frontier in terms of innovation and future proofing. I think it's super exciting.
All right. Halftime intermission over. We're going to move to talent and transformation. And maybe this is a demarcation point, because I think business models and ecosystems is kind of like how we plan things. Talent and transformation oftentimes is kind of like, this is where the rubber hits the road. Like, can we achieve these things that we want to? Because the people will let us, or technology and process will let us. So I'm here with Nina. We're going to talk about talent. Serve it up. Give me your best Sermon on the Mount about why talent will be so important over the next 10 years, Nina.
Brilliant. I think there isn't anything that's more important, but that's doing my job, isn't it? To say that talent is the most key thing. And we were talking about the future of work, and as part of the future proofing picture, the future of work is we are changing in our understanding of that. So 2 years ago, people were saying that the jobs would be decimated. Now we understand that there will be a much greater shake-up of jobs, with a whole lot of new jobs created. And I think what's happening is that when we get increased complexity, we also have a new set of problems that arises. So we are in a state where we're getting increased complexity, and it's possible, and we don't know exactly what the future is going to hold, but it is possible that, in fact, people's jobs will be bigger, and there'll be more problems. There'll actually be, there'll be more need for people. Apart from that, we've got the rise in the need for humanity. So if robots and AI can do what they do without being kind of feeling beings, then humans who can feel and think have a unique place and a unique role to play. So there's a real important thinking there for leaders to actually look at the role of talent. I think that talent is actually going to become more important, and that there is a shift in the way that people are engaging with business, a shift in expectations due to networking and the peer-to-peer economy, the rise of ecosystems, massive transformations in business models, and the things that we're talking about, meaning that jobs will be redefined and not just not just shifted, but shaken up. And so we're talking about transformation that's ongoing and consistent and speeding up, all driven by technology change and converging ecosystems. So we've really got a lot that we need to kind of wrap our heads around, and I think we're in a stage where we actually need to wrap our hearts around it as well, and help people to be more resilient, to actually be able to be excited about change, to be adaptable in the face of change. So there are some really significant challenges for leaders to get their heads around.
So certainly you've made a pretty clairvoyant call there in terms of the importance of talent. I can argue both sides of this in my head, or in terms of the optimism that I should feel about talent over the next 10 years. I would say 60-40, 40-60 articles written about, no, it's going to be a great future, and we're going to have boundless singularity, productivity, wondrous things that we could have never invented before. And life's going to be great. It's going to be like Star Trek. or it's going to be dark mirror and it's all going to go bad and we can't find jobs. And I know, well, I'll ask it as a question. Where do you side on that one, Nina?
I think we're all wrong and we're all right. So we're just thinking about the future in the wrong way, and we can learn that from companies like Shell and others who've used foresighting to say that we need to actually understand not the future in a linear perspective, thinking that the future is going to be an extension of what we currently know, but actually thinking about it in terms of a variety of different scenarios and the way that things could play out. And that enables us to plan for the best and the worst and options in between. And I think that's where people are not preparing themselves, is that they're looking to understand the future as you would understand a show on Netflix, right? That you turn it on and you think, I know the characters, I know the way this is going to play out, I know the kind of journey that this producer's and director is taking me on, I know what to expect when I turn that channel on. So they're kind of looking for a Netflix style understanding and explanation of the future. And in fact, the future could be that program or this program or this program or this program. There could be a whole lot of different ways that it could turn out. And we really need to expand our thinking around what's possible.
Such a great product idea, though, like a Netflix of the future. I love that idea, though, even though I think you don't want that. So you've come to the table with a couple of different companies that you think are vanguards for this movement. Which ones are these?
I have looked at this through the lens of what are the things that companies really need to do in the talent arena to prepare for the future, and what can we learn from what they're doing now to take us into the future and what we already know about that. So the first one is Microsoft. So the advantage of a big name like that is we can more easily follow what they're doing and learn from their success. And the reason I chose them is because they have really focused on culture. So they were voted best company culture this year, voted across 10 million ratings. And as we know, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that's a phrase made famous by Peter Drucker. And I think what he meant there is that a really powerful culture is a sure route to organizational success, even more than powerful strategy. So of course, strategy is critical, but culture is really a super driver. And defining that, what does culture actually look like? People have defined it in lots of different ways, but one thing we can say is that it's not one action or one conversation or one symbol or one system, but at some point, once those things become patterns and become repeated and become consistent, then you're starting to create a new normal. And that's when you have a culture, and culture constantly flexes. So some people influence the culture, others kind of take and receive the culture, but we still have the capacity to shape it, and that's what Microsoft is actively doing. And I think we can see how the market's rewarding them. They're the second most valuable company on the planet at the moment. And I think, I saw an example up close of how they were doing culture really well. In that they were, so when one of my roles was leading the Australian program around telework, it was called at the time. So working from home was to double the number of people working from home. And we had Microsoft on a stakeholder, a kind of industry panel. And they told us then that their journey to activity-based working was 6 years in the making. So instead of seeing flexibility as a tack on or a process or a policy that they could just kind of write down on paper and then it would be, they recognized that there was a culture of flexibility that they were going for, and they actually really took the time to develop that. So yeah, I think that I know that companies that invest in their culture going forward are going to be the ones that have got more of that that ability to work within. I guess where I see it is when people are working flexibly, they need to be able to work within the culture because they're making autonomous decisions. So the culture kind of tells them how we do things around here. What is the way that we do things? So, and flexibility is absolutely a super trend at the moment.
Andrea's going to be very happy that you've picked Microsoft. She is a bit of a fangirl of Microsoft as a culture winning type of organization. Any other, did you pick another company that maybe is smaller than Microsoft, is slightly smaller?
Yes, I could. So I've actually got two others.
Okay.
So if we got space for two,
Let's do it.
they decrease in size. So the next one is actually Qantas, and I chose them because of their focus on the employee experience. So Qantas is Australia's national airline. They've been voted 3 out of 4 years running as Australia's most attractive employer. And so what they're doing, I think, has a lesson for all of us going forward in the future of work. And essentially they've recognised that the competition for the best talent is extremely fierce. And that's, I think, going to become more and more the case as we look to get the best people in their areas. You know, in the future of work, we want people who are super learners, who are ready to give their all, who are internally driven. They don't work for a paycheck, but for a mission and a calling. And those people do have basic expectations from their employer, like, you know, they just see as hygiene factors. They want a positive culture. They want rewards and recognition. They want continual feedback. They want learning and development opportunities. They want flexibility and a clear purpose. And so what Qantas is doing really well, and employees are voting that they are, is they're matching their great brand with the reality of the experience for employers. So they do a number of things. That they have an onboarding software that creates a great premium experience from the start. They have a people experience strategy. So they're really not leaving it to chance what the experience is that people are having in the business.
So you've got a culture example, you've got an employee experience example. Did you take it into a different avenue on your third one?
Yeah, so with a company called Kazoo, so they're based in South Carolina. They're a much smaller company, 58 employees. And yeah, so the reason I chose them is that they are doing change management really well. And I think for me, this really links back to the way that people are engaging with business in a different way, have different expectations around what a company or a business is going to offer them. And change management, if we're talking about transformation, change management has to be one of the key areas that we look at, because it's really quite well known in change management circles that most change is really ineffective. So there are a variety of different pieces of research that have found that only about 1/3 of the change initiatives that are started are not successful. And so, you know, if we think about an era of rapid and increasingly accelerating transformation, we can't accept change that is not successful. So I think that there's a number of reasons why change isn't, but one of them is that the command and control model is really fading, and people want more involvement. In fact, there is evidence that people are not change resistant. They're resistant to change that has been forced on them without having any involvement or without having any, any idea of how to shape it. So what they're doing at Kazoo is that they're actually really actively promoting getting managers involved in the process, and their CEO has talked about how that really accelerates buy-in and helps to tackle that skepticism. So yeah, I think that's an example of a company that's recognizing that there is a change to change and how we do change, and that's something I've seen to be extremely successful. When you involve people, the success rate just really goes up. And I've had people say, I don't know what we did that made this work so well. And it's really, you know, it seems almost counterintuitive. It seems like a kind of losing strategy to involve people, but in fact it's a winning strategy, and it's what we need to do more of.
I love the mix of them. I love the mix of the size of the companies, the geography of the companies. Those are 3 really good ones, and I think there's some takeaways for people as well. We're going to put a button on that for a second. We're going to go to your kissing cousin to talent, which is, you know, transformation, which has a process and a talent and a technology angle to it. And then we'll hopefully coalesce on all of our discussions after Farid goes on transformation. Farid, you know the plumbing of what works digitally inside companies. Why is transformation going to be so important for the future? And you may be muted.
I'm not anymore. So, transformation is important, and there's so many ways that we can look at this, and you and I have talked about this many times. So I decided to take kind of a very local approach, go small, go local, and maybe kind of shine a different light on this by looking at companies that may not be well known outside of Quebec and Montreal.
Wonderful.
And kind of highlight the challenges that existing businesses have, because they have to transform an existing model, and they very often have to break things in order to get there. The issues that I see day in, day out with my clients is that we talk about the flashy things around Uber Eats and all these model Airbnb and all that, but if you're a distributor, if you're a retailer, the big challenge is thinking outside the box without killing the box that you're in right now. So I kind of took 3 examples, and the first one is a really small. It's a bike shop that's in the area called Primo Vélo. They're online.
What's it called again?
Primo Vélo.
Okay.
Primo, I guess, Vélo. And 6 years ago, they just had 2 boutiques, no real POS, no real cash register that's interconnected, no ERP, and that's the reality for most businesses in most countries. I've been to France, of course the US, I assume Australia is the same thing. And they have this huge ramp up to get their systems to be ready. And this guy kind of came in and said, if I don't do something, my store is going to disappear because people are going to buy their bike parts online. So I'll be that destination. And we went through all this transformation of, I got to get a new ARPN, new POS, train my people, change this, change that. And it took 3-4 years. And that's a long time to support, outputting money before you actually are able to sell online credibly. And now, like 5 or 6 years after, he opened a 3rd store. He didn't close the other 2 stores, but now he's got a 4th store, which is his online store. He's the largest Trek bike seller in Canada, and he's growing like mad because he made that investment. And I'm going back to that. You're small. There's some basic requirement that you have to do in order to be able to transform your business. So you got to change, and it's extremely expensive, even though the amounts may not be huge by Microsoft or Qantas comparison, but they're significant nevertheless, and they get no support for the government. They get no funding, they get no incubator, they get no venture capital. They just have to bootstrap it themselves.
Well, it's funny, even the big consultancies don't really write about them, right? Because they're not potential clients. So
my point exactly is that there's this 98% of all the businesses are small and medium businesses in numbers. And these guys are really kind of banging their head on the wall to say, what do I need to do?
Interesting.
The second example is I'm in mostly retail, distribution, manufacturing, industries. We talk a lot about the front office or the front end or how to, get the new store experience. But what I realize is transformation has to be back office as well. Transformation has to be you know, changing your warehouse, making sure that your distribution changes, because we're on the cusp of being able to have self-driving cars and trucks, and that's going to be a huge impact on the logistics and supply chain and distribution. So you got to be prepared to change and to get those sensors and those RFID tags and those robots in the warehouse. And there's a company called Lumen Electric that has invested a tremendous amount. They're a distributor, and they've invested a tremendous amount in order to robotize their warehouse and distribution center. I could have picked a number of other examples, way larger. Andrea, you talked about grocery. Grocery is kind of the next. I mean, I've been doing that for 25 years, but you know, huge volume, low margins, they need robots, they need automation. Ocado in the UK has been bringing this robots. But I wanted to highlight Lumen because they're small. Again, they're relatively small. They may be, you know, a couple hundred millions in sales, but the company had to invest and kind of try to compete, and because otherwise they're just going to not be able to follow.
Why did they robotize everything? I could imagine a couple things. What was the driving reason?
I didn't work with them specifically, but definitely efficiency and reducing the cost, allowing them to be more nimble. And there's a huge human impact. I think it was Nina that was talking about the human resources aspect. Companies are struggling to hire people in their stores or in their warehouse. We're lacking resources, so you need robots in order to just be able to do the work, which is what I assume is definitely a driver for many.
Take us home. What was the third company you identified?
The third company is a company called South Shore Furniture. If you know Wayfarer, they're
Yep.
kind of like that. They sell furniture, but they also manufacture furniture. And the story is that they're in Quebec City. They have 5 manufacturing plants, 1 in Quebec, 2 in the US, 2 in Mexico. They're really big, and they used to sell through distributors, right? And then in 2007, 2008, the bottom fell on them, and their market disappeared overnight. And they said, hey, let's try this Amazon marketplace, right? I think the internet may be a thing. And they realized that they could actually sell furniture online. And now they went from selling maybe 2% online and 98% through distributors through selling 95% online through distributors, right? So a lot of their stuff you're going to buy on Amazon.com or Wayfarer or other distributor or marketplaces. But they had to do a transformation and say, if I can, could I sell directly to the consumer? And I see a lot of that without disintermediating, without killing, your distributors. Can I have a direct to consumer path? And when they do that, then they have to transform because they have to learn a new trade. They have to learn to sell to a customer. And the first time that I came into their office to do work, they brought me into the Sarah room, and Sarah is their persona, and they break it down into Sarah Jane and Sarah Joe and whatever. So they have different personas. They're all named Sarah. And they brought me into that room, and they've mapped their persona and the customer journey. And they've done a tremendous job at mapping it for a manufacturer. But now they have to kind of think outside the box and think as a retailer. And that's different skills, different processes, different tools, different a lot of things. So that's another way that transformation kind of creeps in. I
love the range of ideas, and to go back to Gregg's earlier point in terms of, so these companies transformed, and it sounds like, at least in the last case, they changed to a different business model. did they transform first and then found a business model, or had they planned on changing their business model and then they realized transformation was the requisite?
It's agile. I mean, agile, we've been doing that in software development for 20 years. Agile has become the modus operandi of their business. They've been doing that for 10 years. They have long-term goals, long-term strategy, and then they have quarterly
Nice.
goals and objectives. So going back to an article or blog post that you and Andrea put together this week about being a generalist or a specialist, I go with you gotta have a vision when you transform. I want to go in that direction, and then so that's the generalist approach if you want, and then you gotta execute on a quarter to quarter, inching your way forward, because there's no way you can big bang the whole thing.
Okay, we're like in the fourth quarter, if to use a I don't know, it's an American football term, Nina, so I apologize, but I'm going to use it anyway. We're in the fourth quarter of our discussion here. I thought we haven't heard from Gregg for a while. Just maybe 30 seconds in terms of what you've heard today and kind of your worldview now in terms of what the future holds.
Just like the future holds immediacy. The expectation is immediacy. You need to deliver everything, whatever it is that you have, your service, your product has to happen fast. It needs to be, there needs to be a relationship building component. You need to create a sense of belonging. You need to do everything faster and cheaper, and be more interesting all at the same time. So
so no compromise.
Get easier. It does not get easier. I must say.
Man, I was hoping you were going to say it's going to get easier.
No, it's not. It's going to get a lot harder. But a lot of the tools are gelling a little bit better. So we're in the Wild West in many ways as far as platforms, tools, sort of everything. It's still a little bit wild. Nothing seamlessly interconnected, but there's maybe a little bit more. It's just terrible to even say stability, but there's a little bit of stability. Like social platforms are such a key to the business that I'm in, that I want to say that they're a little bit more stable. But anyways, I learned a lot of just thinking about the ecosystems, just thinking about everything that you're saying, talent being important. Nina, you talking about like the heart and humanity. I think that's a big part of everything that we do here at Engage Youth, and just driving that home. That's something I really got out of this as one.
Very cool. I love how in each one of our webcasts today, it seems like just being a genuine kind of coming together of kind of conclusions. So Jonathan, your view from the mountain?
Yeah, just reflecting what Gregg was just saying a moment ago, faster, cheaper, on demand, the trends in medicine, which I was talking about earlier, towards precision of diagnosis and personalization of care, are very consistent with these trends that Gregg is observing, and certainly that we're seeing in other quadrants of the digital landscape.
Very cool. Nina?
For me, hearing some of the examples from health, from retail, from manufacturing, even the restaurants example, it's good evidence of the level of change and shake-up that we need to expect. So I think that's a real take-home for me, is that I think everyone wants to kind of get comfortable, get our heads around what the future is going to hold, and in fact, we've kind of got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
And I think it's very individual too, right? Back to our future of work stuff. It's I've worked in large companies before where it's like, yeah, but that's Joe's job down the hallway. It's like, no, it's not Joe's job, right?
Absolutely. That's a siloed mentality that's not going to be a very successful approach going forward. Certainly not good for innovation.
And Farid, what's your consensus thought?
I think think globally, act locally is what I tried to put forward. So that should be clear. There are success stories locally in smaller organizations, and conversely, smaller organizations shouldn't be afraid to try to transform. But listening to all the others is very often transformation is presented as a technology-driven thing, and it's very often true that technology enables a lot of these transformations, but they usually fail because processes don't adapt, or organizations fail to adapt their processes, or organizations fail to support their employees in that transformation. And I think all the others have covered that beautifully. You gotta consider the people, process, technology when you do transformation.
All right, so we're all becoming generalists. We all need to know everything to get to that faster, cheaper, better world. Andrea, consensus view.
My consensus view is a short statement, which is I love that the non-sexy aspects of transformation are actually going to be on the front of our imaginations. I mean, I think that this notion of back office is really interesting. That Farid was talking about. I think that the notion of dock in the pocket kinds of things that Jonathan was talking about, like, you know, the shift of, you know, in the US, because I also look at healthcare in India, Africa, you know, China, Japan, all the places that we go to, and you know, such different models that certainly there's going to be some innovation across many borders there. I think that this notion of heart, I'm going to echo the reminder that Nina spoke about, because, and Sean and I believe that it's people, you know, at the end of the day, business and all this, and employees, all these crazy words, but at the end of the day, it's people, and getting our hearts around this is pretty damn important. Mm-hmm. And then I think, Gregg, the notion of whether the existing business model, you know, whether the kind of Gregg versus Farid, not that you were arguing, but, you know, is it the existing companies retooling themselves because they need to and they can, and being brave and having leadership that's going to kind of be the model of the future, or it might be both and? Is it these kind of a startup that's coming out with a kind of fresh, no holds barred mindset that's going to really bring us forward? And I came away from this one really very positive. And as I said, I always love the nerdy back office innovation things, because they don't get any ink, you know, like we never read about that stuff, but there's a whole lot of potential there. So I thought the panel was amazing. Really incredibly thought-provoking.
Well, let's see if I can bring this home in 60 seconds. So I'll either talk fast or go through quickly. First of all, thank you, panelists. There are many people out there that say, oh, I don't know if I should talk about this topic or whatever. Maybe it's out of my... You did not. You stepped up to the plate. You did it with a lot of intelligence. And we now have 12 or 13 companies that we're now going to put on our nominee list for the Futureproofing Awards based on your input. So thank you. You can have, I guess as the process goes, we're going to have the expert nominations this month. We're going to open it up to the general public that they can nominate their own and provide reasons why. We'll have judges, and we're going to interview some of the candidate companies and declare winners in April. So look forward to that over the next 4 months. We have declared what we're going to focus on research-wise in Futureproofing next. Here are the 4. I'm not going to outline all of them, but certainly myself and Nina and a group posse of 30 others are looking at the future of work from a number of different angles, and that's going to be a real focus of ours over the next five months. Next slide, Andrea. We're writing a book. I still hear people write books and read books, so we're writing a book. It's due out February 10th. My hope is you'll like it, read it, and tell your friends. That's all. We're also building a global network of champions. Perhaps the 4 that we're on today might be interested in becoming part of our round table, a little global guild that hopefully tackles some of these big challenges together and has some fun while we do it. We've had 2 other webcasts today. They're all going to be at Futureproofing Now on our website over the next couple of days. So a lot of different insights to tear through. And we've got 2 for January that we've already set out, 2nd and 4th week of January. Those are topics. And the last slide, I think. Is there a last slide? There might not be.
Nope, that's the last slide.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And this is our last webcast before the holidays. So enjoy yourselves. Have fun. Don't have too much fun.
Wait, are we doing the Christmas sing-along now?
Do you have a song in mind?
No,
Please,
I was just trying to shock people.
But enjoy, and when it turns January 1, we're into a new decade. So we'll be all about the future, certainly based on milestones. If not, we got to live there too. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.